Okay, so your new book, A Better Life, explores topics around immigration and liberal naivety.
Mhm.
How has it been received in the press?
Sure. Well, it's apparently a love it or hate it book, and it's a perfect litmus test of what your politics are. So, right of center, everyone loves it. I haven't talked to anyone with even faintly conservative leanings who hasn't loved this book. Then there's the other side. And universally, the left of center, and especially the more progressive, absolutely detest this book and cannot say enough mean things about it. I mean, they exhaust the thesaurus under horrible. And what's been interesting to me is that, as I would have if I had the same political leanings and wanted to skewer this book and make sure that people didn't read it, it's not predominantly been attacked on a political level, but it has been attacked as on an artistic one. So it's hectoring. It's written like a long op-ed. It's being attacked on formal grounds and on the level of craft. So that's sly. Although if they were really sly, if they really had a lot of self-control, they would have used their biggest weapon available, which is to ignore it. They can't. It makes them too mad.
Well, that's positive, I suppose. And I read a piece of yours in The Spectator recently about bad instances with journalists. Has this book reminded you, perhaps, of being more skeptical of people like me?
You know, I hate to go on the record on this one, but because it's tempting fate. But I trust you. But you've earned that trust. You've interviewed me any number of times. I thought I had learned my lesson on this, because when I lived in London, I had numerous experiences of letting British journalists into my home and regretting it, because the actual conversation will be about the book. But meanwhile, all they're really trying to do is look around and see if there's anything that they can hang you with on a personal level. And also, I discovered that British journalists can be extremely insincere. This won't come as a big shock to you. Right? So they can seem terribly nice. And American journalists, if they're hostile to you, are much likely to give it away. But the British journalist is more likely to be very cordial and friendly seeming, and then they stab you in the back. So for a long time, I learned my lesson, and I made sure to only give interviews in a West End hotel, one Aldwych. Got very familiar with the decor. And therefore, at least they couldn't use things in my surround to hang me with. But I recently moved to Portugal, and I don't have a nearby hotel, and I reverted to my old hospitality. And again, look to regret it, because the journalist wasn't especially interested in using the main conversation, which was about the book, and was just looking around trying to use things against me. And also, it was a very sloppy job. It was very unprofessional. There were quotes that were made up, and assertions that were factually, well, not just slightly inaccurate, but in outright lies. So yeah, I'm not doing that again. I'm going to have to find some kind of cafe or maybe we'll get together on the beach or something. We're not going back. I'm not letting any more British journalists into my house.
I'm sure if you went to a cafe, you'd be a caffeine addict or something. Let's talk about, again, continuing on the reaction. You've written about controversial subjects in the past. Immigration, obviously, is the kind of zeitgeist controversial thing at the moment. Is this the most controversial book that you've done in terms of the reaction from the press?
Oh, without a doubt. And, I'm of the view that immigration is the big issue of this century. And it's certainly at the very center of the difference between the left and right. And that's right now, but maybe there's something about the issue that comes to the very gist of what divides us. And the right is still willing to defend the nation state, to act out of national self-interest, and the left does not. The left does not believe in the nation state. The left does not believe in its own culture. In fact, he thinks its own culture is evil. I think the left-wing culture is evil, but does not believe in acting out of self-interest, and is promoting a deep self-loathing. And that's why this book is so upsetting to the left. It is at the center of what divides us.
The book is based in New York City and follows a liberal family, or at least liberal mother, who takes in a migrant as a part of a kind of government scheme. Could the book have been set in England or in France or in Europe, or was this a specifically American kind of phenomenon?
Oh, it could definitely have been set in the UK. If I had said it in the UK, I wouldn't have been able to use that fun little element that it's based on a program that the mayor of New York actually proposed. And that's, as much as anything, why I said it in the US. And also, what was happening in New York in 2023 and 2024 was so extreme and so condensed into a very small time period with hundreds of thousands of people coming in over the course of about a year and a half. So that made it attractive as a setting. But the issues are the same. There's one issue that it's going to be a rising issue in the U.S., but it hasn't occupied center stage yet and won't for a while. And that is the issue of Islam, right? So had I said it in the UK, I would surely have needed to use a Muslim immigrant in a Christian or secular household. And that's taking on a whole other ball of wax. And I don't know, maybe I was too cowardly to take that on. I mean, that book will have to wait.
Sticking with New York City, obviously Mamdani has become mayor. The previous mayor was Eric Adams. Is New York becoming, like your book, this dystopian? I mean, it already was a few years ago, but is Mamdani accelerating this migrant problem?
Well, one of his first acts was to lift the limit on the number of days that migrants can stay in city shelters. So he's obviously doing the come hither. Fortunately, that's within a context of an essentially sealed border under the Trump administration. Americans can't count on that discipline being maintained because he's got less than 3 years. And if the Democrats get in 28, which is entirely possible, I would say more than possible, then I don't see why they won't just throw the border open again.
Let's talk about the publishing industry. Now, obviously, you managed to publish this book despite its being a very controversial subject. And I know that you like to sort of burst taboos. Is that a good way of describing some of your writing? or at least discuss taboo subjects. Do you feel
I like to fill a need. I want to write books that other people are not writing.
Yeah. So do you feel that the publishing industry now or today is too afraid of going after some of these subjects in a way that perhaps they weren't in the 20th century or the sort of latter half of the 20th century? Do you feel that we're living in an age where authors are more worried and concerned about the blowback, pushback, and so on, and therefore, as you say, some of these subjects just simply aren't written about from certain perspectives?
Oh, it's a very dangerous thing to do. And, we are not really in the post-woke era just because Americans, by a very small margin, really, elected Trump president. So that doesn't change the whole Western world. I mean, you look at what's going on here, you look at what's going on in Australia, in Ireland. It's the Anglosphere is still woked up the ass, really. Nothing's changed. They feel a little more on the defensive because of what's going on in the United States, but in some ways they also feel more motivated because of what's going on in the United States. So, I don't think the fight is over. As for what's going on in publishing, I'm hopeful that that publishing is getting a little less consumed by DEI, and because there were years there that all they cared about is not whether an author was any good, but just what their their racial identity was, and that's a real dead end for literature. And right now I think books need all the help they can get, and the bigger problem with publishing is not even political. It's that reading is decreasing as a form of entertainment.
Have any readers of your latest book told you that maybe their perspective on immigration has changed as a result of reading the book?
No, they haven't. But I am not convinced that a novel is capable of doing that. I don't think columns do that. I don't think podcasts do that. We're not living in a time that people change their minds about things very much. And we all seek out people and sources of information that confirm what we think already. And I don't think this book is going to be any different. I would love to say that, I've run into any number of people who say, their eyes have been opened. But honestly, I hardly ever hear that from anyone about anything I write, nor do I hear it from anyone about something that someone else has written.
You haven't persuaded the New York Times reviewers or anything like that? Not just yet.
Oh boy, did they hate that.
Is there anything too taboo for you to write about?
There's probably nothing too taboo for me to write about. There are things that I would not choose to write about because I don't feel a sense of ownership about the topic. I have strong feelings, for example, about the situation in Israel. I'm a big supporter of Israel, but I would be reluctant to write a novel about the Palestinian-Israeli conflict just because I don't feel it's my material. I don't feel a sense of ownership. And that's not cowardice, it's practicality.
Finally, you mentioned you moved to Portugal. Obviously, I know you lived in Britain for a long time, also the United States. Where do you feel most free to write, in terms of freedom of expression and so on?
I feel freer outside the United Kingdom. What's going on here in relation to freedom of speech gives me the willies. When Graham Linehan was arrested in Heathrow, I thought I could be next. And for all I hope not to be misunderstood, that can seem vain. It's not that I think I'm so important, but I was a little nervous about the publication of this book, for example. Who knows who in the Home Office is going to come across it and be offended? And for all I know, I'm in handcuffs, and that's not any longer being melodramatic, is it? There is no First Amendment here. Previously, that was a weird point of pride for the British, because you don't need one. You have the common law. You believe in freedom of speech, and there is a collective dedication to that right, so you don't need it written down. Actually, I'm at the point where I think you do need it written down.
And that's the argument.
Britons may not realize how bad this has been for the reputation of the country outside the country. Americans have finally woken up to what's happening here. They are absolutely appalled. And I would include probably some Democrats. It's not just Republicans. It's like, what's going on over there? What are they doing? And this whole idea of people being arrested because they put out some tweet that was a little abrasive is completely horrifying to Americans, and as it should be. And I hope that Britons have not become inured to the idea that if you put out something that is hostile to the government policy or is a little negative about Islam, that these people end up being thrown in prison. Don't get used to that. That is not this country. You know how Joe Biden, I used to hate it when he said this. This is not who we are, right? But this is not who you are. This is not who you are. It's certainly not who you want to be and should ever have become. And the one thing that I'm hopeful about, if there is a kind of political revolution here, is that the police are instructed, not only no more non-crime hate incidents, but no more hate incidents, no more hate crimes, no more hate speech. One of the things that the United States has over on the UK is that we do not have hate speech legislation, and that hate speech legislation is the thin end of the wedge. Once you start saying you can't have certain emotions and you can't say certain sentiments, you can't be mean about this, and this group, well, then it just keeps getting worse, and that's exactly what's happened.
And it's interesting that Starmer, whenever he's asked about this by, the Americans, or, if he's an oppressor with Trump or J.D. Vance, he'll say, we are the home of freedom of speech, we founded freedom of speech, but it doesn't tackle the kind of contemporary issues around it. It's almost like he's living in that old myth that you were talking about, or that old sort of maybe slightly arrogant perspective of freedom of speech in Britain.
Yeah, and he himself is presiding over the death of freedom of speech in his country. So you can't just rely on happy little aphorisms about your country. What matters is the reality.
Lionel, thank you again for joining us.
My pleasure.